Hello, I'm Shannon Chiesi from the Diplomat, and I'm here at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace with Dr. Milan Vaishnav. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Dr. Vaishnav is going to be helping us talk through the issues surrounding the Indian general election of 2014. The largest democratic exercise in history is underway. 6 weeks, 815 million voters, 100 million of them voting for the first time. It's the Congress-led United Progressive Alliance versus the Bharatiya Janata Party-led National Democratic Alliance. Dr. Vaishnav, what are the issues at stake here for this election?
I would say first and foremost on the voters' minds this time around in 2014 are issues related to the economy. India has seen its economic growth rates essentially cut in half from double-digit growth a few years ago to now below 5% for 2 years in a row. Inflation remains very high, 8 or 9%. Corruption has become a major issue as this present government has overseen a number of really sort of eye-popping corruption scandals related to natural resources in particular. And so when voters are asked, what issue really matters to you as you think about how you're going to vote this time around, the top three issues are economic growth and jobs and sort of development, inflation, and corruption. And traditional issues of access to government patronage or identity politics, those are still important, but they actually rank closer to the bottom than these core economic issues do.
Now, there's a lot of discontent towards especially the incumbent party, Congress, and a lot of people are projecting that the opposition party, the BJP, will carry the day with their candidate Narendra Modi taking the seat of Prime Minister. We haven't seen the BJP in power since 2004. What do you think we could expect from them if they are brought into power?
Well, the BJP has essentially had a focus this time around in the campaign on this economic agenda. They feel like when they were last in power from 1999 to 2004, they put into place many of the reforms that led to the record economic growth rates that India experienced. They have a candidate, Narendra Modi, who has presided over a very prosperous state in Western India, which again has amassed very high growth rates, high rates of investment, both foreign and domestic. And so that is, in the national theater, really the focus of their campaign. In the manifesto that they came out with last week, they talk about themes of increasing foreign investment, making India more hospitable to foreign investment, curtailing kind of wasteful expenditures and subsidies. Now, we'll see when the rubber meets the road how many of these reforms are actually going to be able to implement. But there's another part of the agenda which is in the manifesto, which has not gotten as much attention, but I think many people are concerned about, which is some of the pro-Hindu social policies that some minorities in India fear would trigger a kind of majoritarianism that they wouldn't like to see India return to.
Now, on the flip side, if Congress does lose control of India after 10 years in power, what is that going to mean for that party moving forward? What changes do you think they might consider making to regain public approval?
Well, if the polls are to be believed, Congress is on track to suffer its worst defeat, perhaps in the post-independence period. One thing to keep in mind is that the Congress has suffered huge electoral setbacks before. In 1977, after then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi oversaw a 2-year period of emergency rule, they were badly hurt at the polls. In the late 1990s, they got down to 114 seats, which is their worst performance ever. So you can never really rule the Congress Party out. They have an enormous staying power. It's a political dynasty which has ruled the party for almost 100 years, dating back to the British colonial period. I think that they have to undergo a period of introspection and reinvention. The vice president of the party, the heir to the Congress Party throne, Rahul Gandhi, has talked a lot about internal party reform. He's experimented in 15 seats this parliamentary election with instituting democratic primaries, which has never been done before in India in the post-independence period. So it's really going to have to be bringing in a new leadership of youth that is talking about jobs, skills, mobility, the kinds of issues that are on Indians' minds today, and really moving away from a very kind of hierarchical, top-down party that we've seen for the last several decades.
Now, the two major parties are Congress and the BJP, but they're not the only parties. What role do you see third parties, including the Aam Aadmi Party, playing in this election?
Yeah, I mean, regional parties take up 50% of the All India vote. Huge number of seats in the parliament. Just to give you some sense, in the current parliament, there are 38 parties which are represented. So Congress and BJP are, as you correctly pointed out, two amongst many. Regional parties are going to be very important. It looks like even though the BJP is tipped to be the party with the single largest number of seats, it has a coalition in place called the National Democratic Alliance, which has grown over the past couple of months as the BJP has been able to pull in new allies. It's likely that it's going to need more allies to form a coalition to cross the halfway mark to form a majority. So there are 543 seats in Parliament. The BJP is going to need, with friends, 272 to constitute a government. So regional players are going to continue to be important. But I think that what we're seeing is that the national players have not gone away. I think there was a big fear in India that Indian polity was moving towards kind of an unending period of fragmentation and disorder, and people even likened it to a sort of electoral anarchy. And what we're seeing is that the two major players have a lot of staying power.
The BJP's candidate for Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, has a lot of supporters who point to his economic record, as you mentioned earlier. He also has his critics who say that he is a divisive figure, and they point to an incident of sectarian violence in Gujarat when he was in control of that province. What's your take on Modi and how the electorate in general is looking at him?
I mean, Modi's a really interesting figure. I mean, there are many who continue to see him through the prism of 2002, horrific bloodletting which went on, which over 1,000 people were killed, 3/4 of whom were from the Muslim minority community. In the minds of many, including Muslims, but not only Muslims, a lot of liberals in India view him as someone who is irretrievably tainted or tarnished because of presiding over this massacre, essentially, and they have not been willing to forgive or forget, even though he has not been indicted or convicted by a court of law. But as you say, there's a very large group of people who has moved past the events of 2002, and while don't condone the violence that went on, buy into the idea that Narendra Modi is going to lead India to greater prosperity, to greater social mobility, to be back in the conversation that was a part of when you were talking about India and China as the two rising Asian powers. And so how Modi is going to govern is a question mark. I mean, I think that he has talked a lot about development. He has not talked a lot about pro-Hindu policies. He is really focused on kind of bread and butter issues. And I think that is the mandate that he will be given if he does end up with the largest number of seats. But the proof is in the pudding, as they say.
And as we've been talking about, this election is largely focused on domestic issues, but of course a change in government will have foreign policy ramifications. What do you think this election will have an effect on India's relations with Pakistan?
So there's a big question mark here. As you say, foreign policy has not been really a marker of this campaign. Modi has given one foreign policy speech in which we didn't really learn a lot that was very new. I think there are two schools of thought. One school of thought suggests that Modi is going to pull a sort of Nixon in China, that because he comes from the Hindu right, he has those bona fides, that he'll be able to bring about a rapprochement with Pakistan. As his predecessor in the 90s, Prime Minister Vajpayee was able to do, or at least tried to do. Then there's a second school of thought which says Modi has no interest in that he essentially views Pakistan as a basket case and is going to leave it to them to sort their issues out and is going to focus domestically. I tend to believe that the latter is what we're going to see, that Pakistan is not a primary concern, that Modi has no inclination necessarily to make positive noises, at least not at the outset when he has such a significant domestic agenda in front of him, that Pakistan is going to be an issue that, unless there's a kind of crisis, is not going to be on the front burner.
Well, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today, but stay tuned to The Diplomat and we'll keep you informed of the results in India's ongoing election. Once again, I'm Shannon Tiesi from The Diplomat.